This episode is supported by Fulton Commons, and if you're looking for a place to co-work, look no further. It is a super cute space with lots of light, and it's great for individuals and organizations. Like us, CityCast is there, and I love to change up my workspace, and you can do that so easily just within the building. Like, I like to start out with a cup of coffee, looking out the window at the trees, then pop over to these bright pink booths, and then I end my day tucked into a desk at the library-inspired corner. But what's truly unique about Fulton Commons is the shared commercial kitchen on site. So for co-working members, this means lots of food-related events and maybe a taste of Pittsburgh's next big product. And for professionals, this is a perfect place to start or grow your business. There's over 8,500 square feet of kitchen space, and Fulton manages the kitchen infrastructure. There's access to equipment, storage, prep and cleaning areas, everything you need, whether you're a baker, prepared meal provider, food truck operator, or doing something else that's super cool in the food space. Visit FultonCommons.com to learn more and request a tour.
This is CityCast Pittsburgh. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Joanne, I'm wondering if you've seen this trend on social media where people are celebrating 2016, like posting old selfies or memes or like mimicking that aesthetic. I was thinking about this leading up to our conversation today because that is the year that Uber ATG came to Pittsburgh. And it almost made me nostalgic for what people used to say back then, which is self-driving cars are just 10 years away. And I could not stop laughing when I thought about it.
That's so funny. I wish I had made that connection. That is very good. I did go back into my feed to see what I was doing in 2016.
I'm guessing you were riding in a few of these. Y'all, I am talking to Joanne Muller, the transportation correspondent for Axios. We're going to talk about self-driving cars here in Pittsburgh. This latest announcement that Waymo is here. But also, I feel like we should put them in context with all of the companies that have tested here that came before Waymo. And Joanne, you have been here really for all of it, floating in and out of town and all over the nation.
That's right. Yeah, I covered the auto industry forever. And around that time, 2016, 2017 was sort of peak hype for autonomous vehicles. I used to work for Forbes, and I was mostly covering the auto industry, and Axios called me up and said, hey, we're going to start a newsletter about autonomous vehicles. Twice a week, writing only about autonomous vehicles. And I was like, really? Do you think it might be a little early? And they said, well, we just think it's going to change the world. So I think they're right about that in the long run, yes. And now I've been here 8 years and, we're finally starting to see them roll out in a lot of cities.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was how people talked about them back then, right? Like, 2016, at least for Pittsburgh, I think it feels momentous because that was the year that self-driving really started to have that big boom here. And for a while, gosh, in downtown and in our Strip District, it just felt like they were everywhere. But now we've got a little more perspective. So I'm curious from you, what was happening back then in the tech space generally, but here in Pittsburgh specifically, that made that moment possible?
Well, I think it all goes back to Carnegie Mellon, right? I mean, they established this robotics institute way back in the late 70s, I think. And then the team from CMU won the DARPA challenge, which was the birthplace of autonomous vehicles, where people finally said, oh my gosh, we might be able to do this. And so there was this gravitational pull, I think, to Pittsburgh. Like, this is where the talent is. This is where robotics is born. And so you had a lot of companies at that time. I obviously Uber ATG at the time was probably the leading one, but then you had Argo, which is no longer in business. You had the company Aurora, which, I guess maybe their headquarters is still in Pittsburgh. But
they are still in the Strip District. Also,
okay.
Full disclosure, I briefly worked for Argo, and whoa, it really gave me a window into just how hard it is to solve for even the simplest things around self-driving. But yes, Aurora is still here.
All right. But I think of them as happening more out in California. But, there's a lot of R&D happening out there, too.
Yeah, so many of these companies had bases in different places, like in Texas and California. Argo had a presence in Germany for a minute. Like they really were kind of all over.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, it's interesting to me that Pittsburgh is still, one of the centers for developing AVs. And, it's an interesting mix. You've got the talent and the, sort of the academic laboratory basis there. Then you've got some interesting roads and challenging roads. You've got weather, which is also good. I'm based here in Detroit and, the Motor City, and they very much do not want to lose the mantle of the future of transportation, right? So there's a lot of things happening in Detroit to try to, be a center for autonomous vehicles. But I think, in many ways, Pittsburgh has them beat for sure.
I feel like back then, like the conversation was always like, why would you come here? Like, why Pittsburgh? But then people would lay it out, right? Like I think that the thing I heard over and over again is that if we can make them work here in Pittsburgh, they can probably work anywhere because you have those weather extremes, you have crazy traffic, well, a lack of a grid, really, in our city center. The hills are wild. There's always construction. And then it's just like, as you're trying to do this thing called geofencing, where they map out where particular features are, like Pittsburgh was an ever-evolving challenge in a way that, like, say, the desert, for example, that's just much more consistent isn't necessarily. It's really interesting to look back on that moment and think about okay, you guys really pick the hardest possible crucible.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's San Francisco's another example, right? It's sort of crazy traffic, lots of pedestrians,
so much
small
rain.
city, but really crazy intersections. Pittsburgh, is very similar that way.
I mean, I think back to our peak, right? Maybe 2018 or so, I think we had up to 6 maybe entities here or testing here. So you started the list. So Uber, Argo, Aurora, Locomation was around for a minute. Aptiv came on the scene, which now includes the company Motional, I believe, CMU. But there were other names too, if you included the software.
AV.
Yeah, and they're here now.
Yep.
Stack and Latitude, both born out of Argo because it didn't survive. I'm curious, Joanne, when you hear that list, how many of those self-driving cars have you personally ridden in before?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let's see. Well, maybe I should go with the ones I never did. Locomation.
Those are big rigs, so those are trucks. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. I haven't yet ridden in the Stack, but I hope to. I've ridden it in all of them pretty much, except for those couple I mentioned at some point or another, usually with a safety driver. Now it's getting to the point where you can go without a safety driver in a few of these.
Did you experience any features or anything in any of those cars that maybe made the experience feel safer to you?
Well, I had a really great experience in a Waymo in Los Angeles that I think is worth sharing because to me, it was the best thing that could have happened. The car hit a pothole, a really big pothole.
We know what
to the
that's
point
like.
Where I had my head down. I think I might have been trying to do some business on my phone and it was like, bam. And I was like, oh, what the hell just happened? And that was the best part was that the car said, I got on my phone, I got in the car a message and I got an audio voice that said, we are aware of an incident. The car is pulling over. Please stay buckled in your seat unless it's an emergency while we review the situation. And so here I was on this pretty busy road in LA. It was like a 4 or 6 lane thoroughfare. It wasn't a highway, but it was a busy road. And there's no shoulder. So I'm parked in a lane with the flashers on. And I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And in about 30 seconds, I got a message that said, everything is fine. We're going to proceed. And so I presume there was some sort of electrical or electronic way for them to check the vehicle to see if it had a flat tire from the pothole. It was a very large bang. And so I found that fascinating because it convinced me that it would be okay if something went wrong. Like there was somebody that was watching out for me remotely that was either looking into the car, looking around the car, or had sensors that at least were telling them the tires are still inflated. And we carried on without incident. And it was like, to me, the best thing that could have happened.
I mean, isn't that interesting, though? The thing that reassured you was knowing that somewhere there was a human touch to all of this, confirming what you were experiencing in the car.
Yeah. Right. Now, I've read plenty of stories out there about people who have had weirder and, not good experiences. Remember, there was a guy who was trying to get out at the airport, I think, and the car just kept circling. He couldn't get out. Very recently, there was a power outage in San Francisco where a whole bunch of cars got stalled. These are not good for the AV industry, and these problems have to get resolved. But I'm just telling you, my own personal experience has been really excellent. Except for the cost, I think the fares were quite high compared to regular ride hailing, but the experience was so much better. There were a couple of times where I had to take a car with a driver, and, I found it horrible. The guy was speeding and weaving in and out of cars on the freeway, and he was lecturing me about things I didn't think were appropriate or wanted to talk about. And it was just very bad. And
you're talking about just like a
me.
regular taxi driver or like ride hailing driver?
He was an Uber or Lyft driver. I don't remember which, but he kind of delved into some dicey political racist commentary. And I was like, get me out of this car.
I mean, that's the thing about self-driving cars is that, like, if you look at their data for the companies that share that, like, they are statistically so much safer than human drivers. They don't make as many mistakes. But it seems like there's still a really hard sell, even in a city like Pittsburgh that's experienced them over and over again, because as humans, we have the expectation that they are supposed to be perfect. We'll give humans grace, but not the machines.
Well, that is a very true statement. Absolutely. I think that is a gigantic hurdle. I would caution against declaring that they're so much safer than a human car yet, because
you tell me, like, what is on the ground, like what's the skinny on the safety situation these days?
Yeah, I mean, one of the people I trust a lot on this is from Pittsburgh, Phil Koopman. He's like a professor emeritus at CMU. He has done a lot of research in this space, and he reminds me and everyone all the time that you can't say that these cars are safer than a human driver because they haven't driven nearly enough miles to compare apples to apples. Waymo and Tesla both put out these safety reports that...
You're using air quotes.
Yeah, I'm using air quotes. Sorry, no one can see me, but... I'm trying to point out that these safety reports are not vetted in a way that we know that they are provable. They make a lot of statements about how they're auditing. Waymo in particular has had an independent auditor to help them with to prove their safety case. Aurora also makes a lot of claims about its safety case. I mean, these companies are trying to be transparent for the most part. Some of them twist the information. If you ask me, I think Tesla is hard to confirm just how safe their vehicles are because the way they present their data is questionable. But people would say that about Waymo too.
Well, and Tesla makes me giggle too, because like the self-driving folks, like the ones that are calling themselves like true autonomous vehicle makers, all get mad at Tesla for calling themselves self-driving.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about that. I mean, Tesla has the potential to really transform this industry with the level of ownership of cars they have and stuff. They just haven't. Their technology hasn't been fully unleashed or, fully proven yet. It's great, but they're not taking the safety driver out yet. They're just beginning to try it in Austin, Texas.
Should we be worried about like things like hacking of these systems, like, kind of the IT backside of all of this?
Sure. I mean, that's been one of the big things that has held up federal regulation. One is the liability, who pays if there's an accident or someone gets hurt. The other is sort of privacy and cybersecurity. And these are not problems that are solved yet. And so we should be concerned about that.
Today's episode is supported by the Westmoreland Museum of Art. I just went and it blew me away. It's been on my list for a long time. It's Western Pennsylvania's only museum dedicated to American art, and admission and parking are always free. Right now, they've got this exhibit, Steel Valley Visions, An American Legacy. It uses this really cool blend of historical and contemporary art to tell the story of how steel shaped our whole region. So there's stuff that used to be here, but a lot of stuff that you can still see. The pieces I loved most were the ones that didn't romanticize Pittsburgh. There's a piece by Colin Campbell Cooper that shows what the city looked like around 1905, and the colors are muted but still vibrant. It's our skyline from Mount Washington, so it feels familiar, but also everything in that image is kind of foreign. And that's the cool thing about this exhibit and an immersive experience in the same space. It all just sort of transports you. You will know these views, these landscapes, these sounds, but you'll get to feel them in a totally new way. Again, all this is totally free, no registration required. Learn more and plan your visit to the museum at thewestmoreland.org.
CityCast Pittsburgh is brought to you by Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania, who believe that abortion services should always be safe, legal, and accessible. Abortion remains legal in Pennsylvania, but not every person who needs it can get access due to economic barriers. Even with insurance, coverage rules, and financial roadblocks can leave patients unexpectedly paying out of pocket. The Vivian Campbell Fund at Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania can help ease the ripple effect costs that show up in real life when scheduling medical care like abortion, such as gas and parking, long-distance travel, or childcare needs. It can even help offset hardship situations like job loss, housing instability, and more day-to-day challenges. Nobody should be forced to delay or go without critical health care because they can't afford it. Learn about Vivian Campbell's story and make a donation to this vital patient support fund at ppwp.org. A gift to the Vivian Campbell Fund is a direct way to support those who need it most. You can help protect abortion services in Western Pennsylvania by visiting ppwp.org and donating to the Vivian Campbell Fund today.
What should folks expect from having Waymo back on the streets here? And Aurora never left, but they're just not as visible as some of these other companies were. How does it work? Like, what as a human driver, what should you do if you see one? And how should you feel about having this sort of thing on the streets next to you in traffic?
Well, if you see one on the road and you're in another car, the first thing I say is close your mouth, stop gawking, pay attention to the road. The Waymo car is not looking at you and staring at you. It's watching the road. I feel pretty confident about Waymos because they're very cautious, right? That could be frustrating to other drivers because they'll give a larger berth, a lot more space at a red light, for example. They won't pull up right behind the bumper of the car in front of them, which means if everyone's trying to make a left turn, when the light is yellow, not as many cars are going to get through because the Waymo's going slower. But I wouldn't be afraid of them. I feel pretty confident of them. I encourage everyone to ride in one if they can.
I do too, but I also wonder how people are using these things. For example, all they've said they're going to operate in is downtown. I've personally seen one in the Strip District, and I've heard that they're around the East End a little bit too. Now, if we're talking about taking a taxi from, say, East Liberty to downtown or back, that makes a little more sense to me. But like, if they're only going to be downtown, the neighborhood's not that big. You know what I mean? Like, I just wonder if at that point it's worth it as a consumer, as a rider, to even bother taking it if it's just from like a few streets over.
Well, I don't know what their operating area is going to be yet. They usually start with, as you mentioned, a geo-fenced area. Generally speaking, they might start with a 10 square mile area, let's say, and then they'll get farther along. And they'll start with neighborhoods that are relatively not that the traffic's busy, but there's a density, like they want to keep these cars running all the time because that's the only way they can make money with it. It will grow in all the markets they've been in. In Phoenix is where they started. They chose a couple suburbs outside of Phoenix. And then they just kept widening that circle. And now they do 3/4 of the metro area, and including the airport, which, that can change a lot of people's lives, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Pittsburghers love to complain about like just how difficult it is to get from anywhere to the airport and back. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be tremendous if that was part of their mission. I guess, as you zoom out, like what is it about self-driving that does make it so hard to solve for? For any of these companies, but even like, a cautious one, like you said, Waymo, why do they have to be so measured? Why is it taken so long?
Well, look, lives are at stake for one thing, right? So the technology itself is really hard. They got the easy part done rather quickly. And then it was that last 2 or 3% that has taken the 10 years. They call them edge cases, the things that you don't anticipate, that don't come up in normal traffic. You can't program them into a car unless they happen and what would happen, right? And so that's why there's sort of a new approach where they're using AI to accelerate this learning right now. And I think that's why you're seeing so many announcements around autonomous vehicles, because they're learning a lot faster. And that's a good thing. But the other thing is that you can get a robot to drive on a road. Okay, whoop-de-doo. But it has to serve people's, their needs. It has to make sense economically. There has to be somebody who's going to clean the cars and refuel them, recharge them. All of that operationalizing a robotaxi is as hard as it is to write the software code for them to drive. And I think that's where we are right now. It feels like robotaxis are everywhere, but they're not. And they're just beginning. And it's going to be bumpy in the convenience department for a while. I mentioned in LA, I spent a whole day driving in Waymos. And the last 2 that I was in, one of them smelled like dirty diapers and the other one smelled like weed. And I was like,
Sort of hard to solve for. Yeah. What do you do about an odor?
Yeah, the car is clean. It looks clean. I asked Waymo about this, and they said in between rides, they have a sort of a spritz of fresh air that comes out of the dashboard. But it did not solve either one of those 2 things.
How far away do you think we are from that, like the business case feeling scalable, like not just in Pittsburgh, but in any city?
I think 5 to 10 years, maybe.
Would you have said the same thing in 2016, 5 to 10 years from then?
Yeah, I remember just those goalposts kept moving. 2020, 2021, 2022.
I mean, there was a pandemic in the middle of that. Like, I'll give them that.
Yeah.
With some of the companies that we do still have, Stack, and I think Latitude does still have a presence here, Aurora, and those. Like, what's your outlook for them? We heard so much about all of them for a long time.
Yeah.
It feels quiet now. I'm wondering if that caution, that quiet is a good thing.
Well, Aurora has been quite active, actually, but not in Pittsburgh. They have been running their trucks without a driver in Texas. They went completely driverless in April of last year with one of their partners. And they made a big deal about it. We're the first one to go driverless. And then they didn't put the driver back in, but they put a monitor in the vehicle.
Yeah. I've heard them called pilots before too, where like a human can intervene, but they're usually choosing not to.
Right. And in this case, I think it was more the customer got a little squirrelish. The customer who had the truckload full of pastries, they were not ready to be the pioneer. And so they said, we're not comfortable. And so Aurora had to take a little egg off its face and put some people back in the car, an engineer, just to observe in the back. It was not a good PR moment for them. But since then, they are expanding continually in Texas. They've got 2 or 3 different routes now, long routes where they're delivering goods for specific customers without anyone in the driver's seat. And, you know, that's, if we think about all the accidents that happen with trucks, just think about heavy trucks and how scary it is to be driving next to one of them.
I have several truck drivers in my family, one of which lost his life on the road in one. So
wow,
very
I'm
familiar.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah. It's a dangerous business, and it's very difficult too on the physical health of a driver. And so that's been Aurora's whole argument here: is we're going to make driving better for truck drivers, and we're going to make it better for the rest of the people on the road. Now, the Teamsters union is very opposed to autonomous trucks, and certainly in California and some other places, they're getting a lot of traction to prevent these things from coming. So I think that still has to be worked out. Chris Urmson, who is one of the Pittsburgh natives who runs Aurora, he has been pretty outspoken, saying, we need to take the driver out, not leave him in. And we're doing good for the world. So we'll see what happens with that.
Still seems to be a bit of a hard sell. But to that regulatory piece here in Pennsylvania, I understand why it's more challenging potentially to, have routes like that here in PA, just again, because of our weather, like it's less consistent than maybe a Texas. But, these companies were successful in lobbying our state legislature to allow for completely driverless operations. But to my knowledge, no one is doing it. No one's done it.
Not in Pennsylvania, as far as I know. Waymo would be the first.
Yeah.
But, Pennsylvania was, honestly, as I think back on it, Pennsylvania was at the forefront legislatively, regulatory, in kind of trying to prepare for this day. And so here we are.
Yeah.
All these car companies or car suppliers like Aptiv want to be involved in this space because it is the future. One of Aurora's co-founders is now running product development at General Motors because he's working on personal autonomy. So this is where we're going. How fast we get there is still a little unclear. But, baby steps, and then all of a sudden, boom. I like to look at it this way. I'm a bit older than you, but by the time they take away my driver's license, I believe I will be very mobile because I will be able to take an autonomous vehicle anywhere, which is a great thing.
Joanne, I feel confident that should that day arise for you specifically, you're going to be leading the trainings at the facilities, telling everybody how to do this sort of thing and how to have the best experience.
That would be fun. A new career.
Yeah. Joanne, thank you so much.
All right. Great to be here. Thanks.
That is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. You can support us by becoming a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor. All the details are at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow with more from around the city. We'll talk to you soon.
I also cover electric air taxis, which to me are following the very same hype curve as autonomous vehicles. And so while they tell me they're going to be flying in a couple of years, I think it's going to be 5 to 10 years from that.
What's an electric air taxi? How is that different than an airplane?
It looks like a cross between a drone and a helicopter, and it has like 4 passengers. And these are going to be shuttling people to the airport over the robotaxis. And that's going to start in places like New York, LA, Chicago, Dallas.
Yeah, I'm looking at a photo of this thing. This looks like some rich people shit, Joanne.